I can do it. Maybe it'll let me. All yours, Mayor Jones.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening on January 24th for one of our regular city council meetings. Let's go ahead and get started with a roll call.
Ruth Causey.
Here.
Matt Lehman.
Here.
David Lowe.
Here.
Teresa Nielsen.
Here.
Jessica Andrade.
Here.
Catherine Disco.
Here.
And Chaz Jones.
Here. Great. Well, thank you all. Tonight, we have on our agenda, our consent agenda, and we'll be following that up with some visitors' comments. And we'll be discussing some old business on the North 11th Street Local Improvement District discussion. We will also then have a second reading of our council rules, a revised ordinance, followed by council and staff reports. So with that, we have a consent agenda, and I'd like to get a motion to pass the consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion on the table by Councilor Causey,
Second.
seconded by Councilor Lowe. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Great. So with that, I wanted to ask if there were any visitors that wanted to discuss anything other than the North 11th Street discussion. Ruth, do you know if we have anyone who wanted to discuss anything else?
I don't believe we did, Mayor Jones.
We do?
We did not.
Oh, got it. Okay, thank you. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and I'd like to have the staff offer an introduction to the North 11th Street discussion so that the city residents can get some background information that they can incorporate into their comments if they'd like. I think that would be more helpful than having them go into it blind. So we'll have staff introduce the topic of North 11th Street Local Improvement District, and then we'll move on to public comments about that topic, and then we'll move forward with our discussion. So with that, Chris, do you want to kick off the discussion on the North Street or North 11th Street Local Improvement District?
I can. Thanks, Mayor Jones. Appreciate it. So the Genitum Summary, tried to keep it pretty simple this go around. Again, this came onto the agenda tonight because it was added to the agenda at the first meeting of January, and due to time constraints, we weren't able to get to it. So the pattern we've tried to create is anything that we don't get to in that first meeting is what spills over to the second meeting of the month as needed, or work sessions, whatever it might be. So we've tried to limit the agenda items to kind of those things for the second meeting. So that's why this is here. If you recall from the work session, there's quite a bit of discussion about 11th Street and potentials. We also talked about other funding mechanisms and had a pretty robust and good discussion, but no decision was made. And so at staff's request, we're really looking for some guidance from the city council on whether to proceed or not. So as stated in the agenda item summary for tonight's discussion, really just looking if the city council still sees the improvements on North 11th Street as priorities for the city, and if we want to proceed or not. Proceeding would in this case would include proceeding with infrastructure improvements as part of a special assessment to the properties going to be especially benefited. And then the second question for the council would be, if the council wants to, if that's the case, then the next discussion would be to direct staff to work with the city engineers to update the original engineers report that was done back in, I think, June it was, and get that updated, get some direction on what the council would like to see as far as updates to that assessment or that report in total. and then bring that back to the city council. Following the process laid out in the municipal code, those would be the first two steps. So first would be direction from the council to proceed with the improvements. Second would be the engineer's report. There's an approval of the engineer's report. So even once we bring it back, if there's things in there that are incomplete or that you'd like to see change, we can still do that before the council would approve the engineer's report. But then once the engineer's report is approved, then the next step would be to set a public hearing and notify those to be assessed, as well as the general public of that meeting, and invite them to come and provide testimony specific to the engineer's report and the assessments that would be noted there. Following the hearing, there'd be deliberation with the council, and the council would consider a resolution to proceed with the project and the formation of the local improvement district. And only upon passage of the resolution would city staff then proceed to undertake construction. Hopefully, depending on the time frame, this summer still was the planned target date here. So that's kind of the process looking forward. Again, not to look too far out, but just so we get kind of full circle here. Once the construction is done, there'd be another meeting where we look at what the actual cost of the project was, as opposed to just the engineer's estimate, which is all we've been talking about up to this point. And that actual cost then would be assessed to all of the property owners. So if the project came in, say, $20,000 under budget, we'd do the calculations, update all those assessments, and send that out, do the notification, and then the city council would consider an additional resolution to finalize the local improvement district at that time. And then all of those properties would receive that assessment recorded against their properties. So that's full circle in the local improvement district. Just to refresh everybody on that process and where we are at in the process. Again, up to this point, the council did request an engineer's report. I think we were pretty clear when that was done. The idea was to take a look at what a local improvement district on North 11th Street would look like, so that we could use that as a tool on assessing if that was the best way to take care of funding up on North 11th Street. Following that ordering of that engineer's report and review by the city council, went to the Public Works Committee. There was some review at the Public Works Committee level, and that came back to the city council in December. And then here we are at a work session in January, followed by this meeting. So kind of gets everybody up to speed on where we are at. Just a couple of important notes, and then I'll kind of turn it back over for questions or to hear from the public that are here tonight. The assessments that are in the packet, even this evening's, and those that have been provided in the past, these are based on the original engineer's report that was provided to the city council. These are done at a staff level, really as a tool and a measuring. They're not by any means set numbers that should be quoted or seen as final numbers by any means. Really wanted to show with this layout, if you've got it in front of you, the different effects it would have if the city were to consider adding additional funds to this project, which was something that was discussed in the work session earlier this month. And so, all of the option A options are looking at a per linear frontage assessment. That's one way that local improvement districts can be assessed. And, 8.1, try to be pretty consistent. 8.1 would be if only the Campo grant, or the sidewalk grant as it's been referred to, was applied. Option 2 on each of these scenarios is if that grant and 300,000 in street STCs was applied, what the assessments to each of the property owners would look like. And then these last three options have been added by myself, would be if the city added an additional 100, 200, or $300,000 towards a project of street reserve funds, which we have, what that would do to the assessments. So again, that kind of just give you an idea. So we have that for linear frontage. In blue, we have similar type scenario for that by area with the different, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Apologize, option 4.B, there's a 4.B and a 4.B second. That should be 4. Or option B5. So my apologies for the B4 and the B4. And then option C, again, came from the engineer's report. And that's taking whatever that linear frontage assessment was and the area assessment was, taking an average of those two, so add them together, divide them by 2, that way you capture both linear frontage and area. And the idea of that was to try to offset any deviations. If you had a really long lot that wasn't very deep versus a really deep lot that wasn't very wide, taking both of those into account, area and frontage, and then taking the average helps each of the property owners there pay a little bit closer to the equivalent of what one another are paying. So that was the reasoning and the effort behind option C. Option D is more similar to option B, which is by area, but it's tiered. Another conversation we heard out of the work session was a consideration of paying the assessment or charging the assessment based on the number of potential dwelling units, I think is what was termed, or the term that was used. And so that's what option D looks at, is for every additional housing unit that you could build on your property, not that was there, but that you could build based on your area, you were assessed one equivalent dwelling unit or one dwelling unit worth of assessment. So if you had enough land that you own that it was big enough for, say, one house, then you would pay that one assessment. If you had a lot that was big enough for 2 houses, so that you had 2 households that were taking benefit of that street, then you would pay twice as much. And similarly, if you had a triplex or a duplex and single family or whatever, if you had 3 dwelling units, you would pay, essentially you'd getting 3 times the benefit. And so you'd pay 3 times the assessment of what just a single family home would pay. And so again, it is by area, but it's tiered. The recognition being that just because you have 300 more square feet doesn't mean that you're necessarily getting 300 square feet more benefit of that street. You really only get that extra benefit when you have enough additional square footage, you can add an additional dwelling unit onto the property. So that's option D. And then option E, for comparison, was if we just assumed, made some simple and rough assumptions here. If we assumed a sidewalk installation at $100 a linear foot, what would everybody pay if you just paid for the equivalent of that sidewalk installation? Recognizing that, surely there's contractors out there that can put in a sidewalk for less than $100 a linear foot. But based off of the engineer's estimate with the curb and the gutter, and you got elevations and you've got some base and you've got mobilization costs and engineering costs, all these other things provided in there. So using the engineer's number of $100 a linear foot, this would be about the equivalent value or the equivalent assessment of somebody's sidewalk being installed. And the second column here would assume that option E would be if we did a local improvement district for just the sidewalks. So it would be like a sidewalk local improvement district, and all the neighbors just paid for their sidewalk installation at $100 a linear foot, charged by frontage. They would pay in total, I think the number is $187,398 cumulatively. And then the balance of the project, the street portion of the project, would be paid for by the city. And so we would use the grant that we received, SDC money, reserve money, and that would all go towards the completion of the street. And talking with the city attorney and Councilor Kazi earlier or late last week and earlier today, the intent on this option E, would be that it would allow the city to form a reimbursement district so that any future development that took access from 11th Street could be charged for that access. It's been noted a few times, there's some properties really just outside of the specially assessed area here, north end of the property to the west of this property, that might benefit from street improvements in the future. And so we'd want to set up a reimbursement district to capture that expense. So again, just another option based on some of the discussions that were talked about at the last work session, just for the council's consideration. I'll refer you to the agenda item summary again for the recommended motions. And I'll just state before we get going into this too far, I do think that North 11th Street is an important street to the community. It's obvious that we've seen increased development on that street and foresee additional development at some point on that road. The city has noted safety concerns there with the improvement of the park in that area and the number of families and kids and bikes and vehicles that have increased on that road. So I do think it's an important street. I do think it justifies using some street SDCs to help for this project. And as I've shown, I would argue that some additional street funds towards this project, if that's what's needed, would be available, and a good option for the council to consider as well. And then for tonight, again, those motions are just, if the council feels likewise that these are important improvements and they shouldn't be put off, and the local improvement district is the way to do them. There's just a couple motions there for your consideration tonight on moving forward with the special assessment, and then giving staff direction to work with the engineer to bring back an updated engineer's report. With that, I'll go ahead and end my staff report. I'm happy to answer your questions now, but I maybe recommend we hear from the public, and then I can take questions during your deliberation as well.
Thank you, Chris. I noticed there's some zeros at the bottom of the page on the table. Was that intentional, or was there error? Just
Yeah, there's a couple of chart errors on here I can point out as well. Thank you. So the zeros are intentional. That very last column actually was not included in the engineer's report. It's the 50 foot of frontage, which is Pippa Lane. So Pippa Lane comes off of 11th Street, and Pippa Lane itself is 50 feet wide. And so if you're doing anything by street improvement linear frontage, we really should include the 50 foot of frontage, which is Pippa Lane, similar to like the lot just north of that. It's one of the Heather Glen subdivision lots, say 68 linear, 68.74, the one just above it, 68.74 linear feet of frontage. And so whenever we're looking at frontage, we've included that frontage for Pippa Lane. When we're looking at area, we're not really talking about a lot that's developable, that's getting the benefit. So we've not included it in the area calculations.
okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
So with that, I'd like to go ahead and initiate public comment. And before I do so, I'm just going to read this statement that we do before each of our visitors' comments. We really do this just to be fair to everyone. This time is intended for individuals to speak and for council to listen. Members of the council will not discuss topics or make decisions during this time, but may take comments or requests under advisement, assign topics to a future council or standing committee agenda, or request staff to take action. Comments about a topic scheduled for a public hearing should be given during the public hearing, not during visitors and comments. Testimony time is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. A 30-second warning will be provided. Speakers should provide their name and city of residence. Providing a council with a written copy of your comments prior or during the meeting is always appreciated. So with that, thought we'd first get started with the folks on Zoom here. We have, I see Maxine Hansen. Maxine, are you prepared to give your public comment?
David Hansen.
Sorry about that. Mr. Hansen, David, Mr. Hansen, go
Yes.
ahead and you have 3 minutes.
So, of course, we're all pretty confused because it doesn't seem like we have a base to start with here, because you don't have any numbers for us, for real numbers yet, I guess. I'm not sure. So I live on 358 North 11th. I would consider contributing some funds to a sidewalk and maybe using the Campo funds for like in front of my house, but not like $5,300 to $30,000 plan that would put a lien against my property. And I am not for the LID, and I am not for street improvements, because here's why. The majority of the traffic uses this as an access to Heather Glen and Quail Glen subdivisions and the park. I think the subdivisions need to follow through on some of their conditions of approval to fix the sidewalks and the streets like they were supposed to do before they built and sold property, it looks to me like. And maybe the Quail Glen one didn't follow through on this, and now it looks like the Heather Glen one's not following through on this because they're building houses on there and they didn't fix their sidewalks yet or improve our street. Why aren't they paying for the majority of the street and the sidewalks because most of the traffic is going there in the parks. So years ago, the street didn't go through. It was a dead end. So why don't we just shut the road off again? Because everybody on the south side of Pippa Lane is fine with the road, just as long as all the traffic's not going through there from all the subdivisions. So you could put your sidewalk in on the west side of the street, close the street off like it used to be, send everybody out the night street like they should be going anyway. And then we would all be happy about it. And you guys would save a lot of money. So that's what my suggestions are. So again, I can't afford that kind of money. I'm a retired guy, and it just kind of scares us to see these numbers and really not know what's going on. But again, I think the best thing to do is shut the street down again and send everybody out the other way, because all the traffic is on that end of the street and they don't need to go by all of us. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Appreciate your comments. With that, we have another person signed up, Deborah Williams. Hi, Deborah, you're muted.
Hi, I'm Deborah Williams, and I live on North 12th Street. 12th Street, mind you, but it happens to be a flag lot that ends on 11th Street. However, we are the only house in this whole thing that does not have street access to 11th Street at all. When we bought the property in 2004, we asked about putting a driveway through all the way between them, and we were told we could not do that because of Buttermilk Creek, the little seasonal creek that runs. That must have fallen by the wayside because they've paved over a lot of stuff up the road. Anyway, we don't use 11th Street. I live on 12th Street. We already pay the 12th Street / F Road District assessments. Now I'm looking at being dinged for assessments on the backyard as well. Doesn't exactly seem fair. I've looked at your formulas, your linear footage and all of this kind of stuff. And I keep trying to figure out how our linear footage is the same or more than the triplexes. I have a real problem with that. I'm also on a fixed income. And the idea that I'm going to get dinged thousands and thousands of dollars to put in a sidewalk I'm never going to use is ridiculous to me. I don't know why developers are not responsible for this. You know, we've lived here 17 and a half years. These people putting in all the triplexes and the subdivisions and all of this kind of stuff. I know that they had to sign agreements to make improvements. Why are you coming back on the few people who have individual homes and asking us to fix it for everybody else who came after? It just does not seem fair. There are other areas that need more fixing up, I think. Why don't we pave to Philomath Community Services? Why don't they have a paved street? Why does 13th Street still flood, and become impassable? Why don't we fix problems like that are real problems instead of gentrifying this area even more? And in all of this, I know that the state's mandating that we get more housing. I understand that. I don't hear anything about affordable housing. And nothing that's been built since we've moved here is affordable housing. These triplexes go for like $1,800 a month. Okay, that's a lot of money coming into those people who own those buildings. Those of us who live in our own homes, we aren't getting any income. And you're asking us to just pay out equal to people who are getting money from their property. We can't do it. I can't pay both 12th Street and 11th Street assessments. It just isn't viable. And I guess that's it. I'm against the whole thing. Bottom line.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. Appreciate your comments. And Ruth, do you have a list of people that are Ruth Causey or Ruth Post? Do you have a list of people that are in the chambers?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Chris, can you help me with starting the video here? not coming up. There we go.
That work?
Okay. I do have Mark Knudsen, Kristen Knudsen, Jason Bushnell, Francis Caldwell, Jeff Peavy,
Who is that last person you mentioned?
I'm sorry, Jeff Peavy, and David Carlin.
And the last person you mentioned, McFarland?
David McFarland.
Great, thank you. Why don't we go ahead and get started with Mr. McFarland?
Okay. Mr. McFarland.
You want to go?
Let's keep it right there, so just-
Hello, Mr. McFarland. Thank you for joining us this evening. Appreciate you being here.
Okay. I own a 330 North Main Street. I've owned it since 1970. And my concern is that,
One moment, Mr.
uh,
One moment, Mr. McFarland. There's a little bit of feedback.
my concern is that Heather Glen is going to not have to pay anything, the same as Quail Glen didn't have to pay anything. And they were supposed to pave that street and improve the sidewalks back whenever they put that subdivision in, and that didn't happen. And now it seems like Heather Glen is getting away with the same thing. And so I'm against the whole thing until something happens with them. And if they pay their part and get their stuff done, then I'm willing to support the sidewalk thing. And the safety thing has been brought up. Well, the safety thing was 20 years ago whenever Quail Glen went in, they put a ditch in front of my house, 4 foot deep and 6 foot wide. It fills up with water during the winter. And they haven't been too concerned about that until now. And I've complained about it. I even offered to pay for the culvert to go in there and the gravel to go in there if they would just put it in. And the other city manager said, okay, we'll do that, but nothing ever happened. So I'm more concerned about that getting done in the street. And I don't care about lights. And if they want to block the street off, that'd be fine with me too, as long as they fix the ditch. That's about all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. McFarland. Appreciate your comments. Councilor Bisco, generally we don't accept questions of our guests during this period. I appreciate you if you can just wait till the end of public comment, that'd be great.
So Mayor, my comment was not about the comment. It was about being able to hear the comments. This is about the 4th round of public testimony that's really not coming through well, and there's a fair amount of feedback. Can there be improvements made?
That's not a discussion for this moment, but
So it's not important that we hear this testimony then?
it's clearly important, but the technology that we have in hand is our existing technology. Chris, is there anything we can do to improve the audio quality?
If we want to take a quick break, I could try swapping out microphones and see if that improves things.
Yeah, let's try that. Let's just take a 3-minute break.
Okay.
Thank you. Chris, do you want to try saying something?
Check 1, 2, check 1, 2, 3.
That sounded pretty good to me. A little bit soft, but I assume you're speaking softly.
How about now? Is that better? Check 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Still a little echoey.
I think Chris is has his microphone on in the other room, which I think that's what's causing it.
Gotcha.
I could be wrong.
Let me go mute Chris's in his office.
Chris, do you want to try that again?
Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3.
That sounds pretty clean.
Okay.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
That had a little bit of feedback, Ruth.
Check 1, 2.
That's
If
good.
the speaker is speaking, then the best option seems to be for the speakers in this room to be off. But if you try to speak, then I'll need to turn the speakers up. Is this better for everybody?
This sounds great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I did not.
Yeah, you're terrible now, Chris.
So we'll go ahead and take the public comment and then turn up their speaker so they can hear us afterwards.
Yeah.
So they won't be able to hear me calling on individuals.
Speakers are on at this time.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah, so why don't we go ahead and have Mr. and Ms. Peavy join us?
Jeff?
Hello, Mr. Peavy. Thank you for coming and joining us.
Hello, my name is Jeff Peavy. I live on North 11th Street. I own 4 properties along North 11th Street. I've acquired these properties throughout the 40 some odd years that I've lived here. Caring for them and maintaining the properties has been my passion. And providing affordable housing for neighbors and friends has been very rewarding. 11th Street has gone from being a quiet little dead-end neighborhood to, at times, a very busy street. Quail Glen is to blame for that. The Quail Glen subdivision went in about 27 years ago or so. The subdivision had conditions of approval. They were supposed to pave, gutter, and sidewalk the street all the way to Pioneer. Somehow the city management at the time neglected to make Quail Glen subdivision fulfill their conditions of approval. Instead, we got a blacktop road with a huge drainage ditch running the length of the north side of the street. The city made some unfulfilled promises about culverts and filling the ditches. Shame on them. When Heather Glen subdivision went into place, I had the opportunity to buy one lot adjacent to mine. I decided to purchase it, but it had some conditions of its own. I had to agree to a 20-foot easement for a detention pond and an 8-foot easement for utilities. The Heather Glen had to have a detention pond as a condition of approval. Unfortunately, it was on my lot. The subdivision built the detention pond and installed a block chain fence, but so far that is all that has been done. I'm concerned that the city may forget to require the subdivision to finish the 3/4 road improvement, sidewalk, etc. I would like to ask the powers to be to finish the project. The general consensus among the local property owners is to get this project finished. At this time, we are not in favor of an LID. None of that big spreadsheet that was given to us made kind of much sense. And then so let's just get Quail Glen or Heather Glen finished and leave the rest of the street alone. I know some of the folks would just assume make it a dead end street again, but let's just see what happens. Thank you for your time. I'm back out with the mask.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peavy. Next up, we have Ms. Frances Caldwell.
Mayor Jones.
Yes, Ms. Post, can you bring up Ms. Caldwell?
Francis?
I guess I can take this off. It steams my glasses. My name is Frances Caldwell. I live at 359 North 11th, renting from Jeff Peavy. However, I am part owner of 385 11th with my son, Troy Wheatley. I oppose the formation of a local improvement district for the following reasons. The assessments on property owners are excessive and inequitable. I am retired and on a limited income. My son is coping with a mountain of medical bills. Based on the most recent engineer's report, we would be required to pay $14,000 if the sidewalk only option were chosen, and up to $51,218 if the full project was put forth. Our property is a mere 0.19 acreage and valued at less than $122,000. Some of the other property owners are even more financially burdened than we are. As stated many times before, North 11th is used regularly by far more city residents than the few who live on this street. Why are the few required to pay when so many others benefit? From research on LIDs in Oregon, number 2, my second reason, it appears to me that the city has not followed the state of Oregon rules for setting one up. In general, property owners initiate an LID. 50% must agree by signing a petition circulated by property owners themselves. I have never signed or even seen a petition of any kind, and I do not know a single property owner who has requested this LID. Secondly, the engineer's reports, both of them, are lacking required information. As required by Oregon statute, there is no detailed description of what improvement is desired. Is it merely a road, or is it sidewalks, curbing, streetlights, sewage connections? I have never seen a detailed description of what it would fund. Recently, City Manager Workman stated that sewers were not part of it because they were updated in 1988. Does the final cost reflect that sewer connections are not part of the plan? Finally, I would like to see earlier developers, such as Heather Glen, be required to comply with the conditions of approval they signed with the city. They were expected to complete sidewalks and 3/4 of the road improvement. They've never been held accountable. All in all, I do not think an LID is in the best interest of property owners. Alternative actions I would like to see are: 1, the use of Campo grant money for sidewalks on the western side of the street, filling in those dangerous deep trenches that now exist. And another thought, could a measly $882,000 for this project be taken from the $12 million Philomath is about to receive via the Americans Recovery Plan? Looking over the budget charts attached to this meeting agenda, the city of Philomath is not in financial distress of any kind. In fact, you could say that Philomath is booming. Giant new apartment complexes, large single-family housing communities, new businesses cropping up, and more. Could the city find a way to finance this small street improvement without placing any part of it on the backs of low-income property owners, some of whom have been here for many years? And that's what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. Appreciate your comments.
Oh, my mask.
Mayor Jones?
Thank you, Ruth. And next we get Mr. Bushnell.
Jason?
Good evening. My name is Jason Bushnell. I live on 560 North 11th. Just a quick background. So I've lived in Philomath since 1976, and I've been at my current address for the last 12 years, and have 5 kids here in the school system. So I definitely care a lot about safety and aesthetics, low crime, nice neighborhood, and those sorts of things. So I put a lot of effort into those. I'm heavily involved in the community. As a matter of fact, right now I'm missing my PYAC coaching team right now to be here at this meeting. So heavily involved. I currently pay over $10,000 a year in property taxes, which is extremely high, of course, in my opinion, but I love living in this city. So I put up with the property taxes to do my part to make it a nice place. So just kind of wanted to propose a question. Just imagine, I know that this isn't a dialogue, but imagine, I know that we all live here in this city. Imagine living your life, minding your own business for the last 12 years, enjoying your neighborhood, and then your spouse comes home one day and says, hey, honey, I saw a document that had us paying $147,000 for a sidewalk. And a little bit of shock comes into play when something like that happens. Of course, I have seen the assessment charts now. I've dug in a little bit, and I joined on Facebook the last work session. So I've seen the price tags, a little bit of sticker shock. Of course, I'll admit anywhere from $82,000 to $50,000. And now I've seen one at $14,000. But as you've already heard, these sort of numbers for anyone is definitely beyond just the financial burden, but even unrealistic. So even if the sidewalk, in my opinion anyway, again, this is my opinion, even if the sidewalk cost $100, I would not be in favor of it. I just don't want it. I've been perfectly happy for the last decade plus without a sidewalk. And then also reading the documents on some of the assessments have been irritating just because of my property is shaped strange, how it wraps around the city park. Imagine sitting there reading documents of different people's opinions about what you should owe based on the strange shape of your property, or some nebulous calculation based on a guess or a nebulous future potential development or assessing, which then multiplies it, which it seems it's that in my mind I have a problem with. It actually kind of sounds illegal, that particular assessment. If not illegal, just being told to pay for something that you have no need, use, or want. If not illegal, it definitely sounds un-American. I'm not in favor of an LID. One thing that makes me nervous is the language for the motions that are on the table is to decide later on these choices on that assessment chart. But in my opinion, none of the choices sound appropriate. So the idea to motion to just postpone any final decision doesn't make me comfortable, because I actually don't like any of those choices. Very
Could you
grateful, however,
second,
for the chance to
please?
speak, and I'm glad the council is taking the time to get public opinion. It seems a little bit backwards that that we spend money on engineering reports, and a lot of work obviously has already been done before getting public opinion. So that seems a bit backwards. And then to find out about it from my wife coming home from work is felt like a little bit of a slap in the face. So again, no benefit to my family for a sidewalk, and it is also confusing to me that 11th Street is getting this much attention. Like has been expressed before, I guarantee that we would not be having these discussions if it wasn't for a lot of development and activity that were certainly not a choice of our doing. And so now the price tags are pretty shocking and unrealistic. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Mr. Bushnell.
Mayor Jones?
Thank you, Ruth. And next, can you call up Ms. Knudsen?
Good evening. So as many of you know, this has been a long ongoing thing for my husband and I. We own property on 11th Street. We are just frankly really ready for this to be over. I'm going to start by echoing the words that our lawyer used in writing a letter to the city of Philomath on November 23rd. He called the process, he called this arbitrary and abusive, and that's exactly what it has been for our family. There have been over 25 different methods of assessment presented and debated. Most of them are not congruent with Oregon law. They are not equitable for us. The process has been a hardship for my family. It's been a hardship for the property owners of 11th Street. It's not how business should be conducted in Philomath. We have had to hire a lawyer to convince and educate the city and the city manager to operate within the law and to do things equitably as are called for in our non-remonstrance agreements. We still live with the fear of being retaliated against every day. I'm continually shocked by the level of suppression and agenda pushing that continues to occur. The fact that councilors Andretti and Catherine Biscoe were removed from the Public Works Committee because they are unwilling to go along with the agenda is wrong. You can spin it a different way to the public, but when you removed Councilor Biscoe from the chairperson and placed her on the police committee, her fourth choice of committees, it is clear what is occurring. The city of Philomath is lucky to have two very intelligent and hardworking individuals. They have invested their time in gleaning valuable information from the League of Oregon Cities and networking with other government officials in small cities like Philomath. They spent countless hours asking hard questions and preparing for public works meetings. Because they are willing to ask hard questions and think outside the agenda box and strive to be a voice for people who are elected by them, they have been suppressed and censored. This past year, they were faced with the very complicated task of evaluating a local improvement district. During this time, they were presented with different charts and methods of assessment at every meeting. In every meeting, it changed. Most of them were full of misinformation and not congruent with the law. You received a taste of how difficult this topic was at the last work session. It has been made out to be that they were ineffective and stuck in analysis paralysis. This is simply not correct. They have been sorting through oceans of misinformation and agenda-driven conversations to try to do what's best for the city of Philomath. To me, it's a travesty that they aren't being used to their full capabilities. I would urge you to evaluate how the citizens of Philomath can best be served by this council and to continue to strive for transparency and respect within the council. Thank you.
Mayor Jones?
Thank you, Ruth. And I believe the last person would be Mr. Knudsen. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Good. Can we go ahead, Tim?
Mark Knudsen, Philomath. On December 8th, I asked the city manager through my attorney and through the city attorney this question. Does the city currently have or have they ever had any type of agreement, non-remonstrance or other agreement with the owner of Heather Glen to participate in a local improvement district? His answer to that question was no. Despite this, in the May 10th agenda packet, that false information was used to initiate the engineering report. In the May 10th agenda packet, it was presented that 26 of the 26 total properties that Philomath had, the city had 16 non-remonstrance agreements, when in fact they only had 5, and 19% of the vote rather than the 61% that was put in the public record. Again, on the next page, it says, again, in this situation, 60% of the property owners have already agreed not to remonstrate. And then on the next page, or remonstrate against the formation of a local improvement district. And then on the following page, or lower, it says under legal consideration, a clear majority of properties have non-remonstrance agreements in place. So these non-existent non-remonstrance agreements were going to be used to outvote the rest of the people on the street. And then during the engineering report on the first page under methods of assessments, he refers to these construction deferral agreements and waivers of rights of remonstrance for Heather Glen again, and quotes these agreements. And then he says lower in the next paragraph, Heather Glen construction deferral agreements, which are also non-existent, addresses the costs to be paid by the subdivision. And based on the opinion obtained from the city attorney, all of the lots created by the subdivision are obliged to pay for the LID. When it was exposed that he didn't have those votes, he went around the neighborhood with this chart, and let me see. So coercion is defined as the practice of persuading someone to do something by the use of force or threats. And on this chart, some of the neighbors got to see 50,000 on one side and then less than 5,000 on another side. And it says at the top of that, city manager's option. So what would you do if somebody showed up at your house and with something from the bad guys, 50,000, and then the city manager's version for less than 5,000? I mean, who wouldn't be afraid? Who wouldn't be likely to say, yes, I'm okay with it, just keep the 50,000 away? That to me is coercion. That's how I would have felt. A non-remonstrance agreement looks like this. It's not a handshake, and it's not a vocabulary word. But surprisingly, even after admitting that through the attorneys, on the council work session on January 10th, once again it says, again, in this situation, over 60% of the property owners have already agreed not to remonstrate. And there we have a play on words, not saying that we have remonstrance agreements anymore, just that they've agreed to not remonstrate. He doesn't even own some of those properties. I'm almost done. And so, Mr. Workman has misled the council too many times to count. But I'm going to give you some highlights. I've had the chance to vet everything that I said through a former Philomath city engineer and professor of municipal engineering at OSU, as well as an excellent attorney. And not one thing I've said has been incorrect. But here's some of the highlights. Mr. Workman proposed at first the idea of using all 10 Heather Glen lots, votes from them, to outvote everybody else, even though only 4 of those lots were even participating in the assessments. There was something like 20 different assessment options that are not even legally viable or being considered anymore because they didn't contain equity. You've been told repeatedly that other people in Philomath have had to pay for their streets when that's not true. You were told, and you were also confused about the type of agreement that Heather Glen had, which is conditions of approval, and the type of agreement we had. And you were told to single out the Knudsens, even though that wasn't legal. The council was also led to believe that it's the council's job to hold Heather Glenn accountable for the conditions of approval, which is strange. That is supposed to be done before a subdivision starts. There's only one example in my 25 years of building that I can think of where the subdivision didn't do that before building homes and selling the properties. The only other example I can think of is the Mill Pond subdivision, where they didn't have to finish the streets beforehand. And in conclusion, 460 feet, lineal feet of 3/4 street improvement should have occurred before this conversation even started, because 306 feet for Heather Glen and then 154 feet for the city park. The city park doesn't have an agreement to participate in the local improvement district, and it would never hold up legally to act like the city could use a non-remonstrance agreement to override the citizens in protecting themselves from the city. It would never happen, or it would never be supported legally. So 460 feet should have just been done before this conversation ever started. And I just want to conclude by saying thanks for letting me talk. And I've worked hard on this for a year, and I can't tell you how much stress it has been. And it is awful. And it's awful the way that this was done, the lack of notice for the neighbors. And this has been truly one of the worst experiences of my life. And thank you for letting me talk. And thank you to the neighbors for coming down.
Thank you, Mr. Kingston. Appreciate you all coming down and sharing your opinions. So, actually, I just want to take let's just go ahead and take a 3-minute break before we let's take a 5-minute break before we get started. That'd be good, helpful. Thank you.
You're the all-star. You are the all-star. She's always. She is. She should be on the council. You did great too, Jason. All of you guys.
Thank you. And then two on the screen too.
We got the.
So what is this?